I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to give you this presentation on the forgotten framers. We know these guys, right? We talk about these guys. Oh, I'm missing one. I forgot to put my photo of Alexander Hamilton up there. Anyway, you guys know these guys. And as a matter of fact, throughout your scholastic careers, you're going to hear a lot about them. And I just want to give you a little warning to guard yourselves with the truth. My daughter just graduated from college, and she took a study. She went to Goucher in Maryland, and she took a study in which they talked about the Founding Fathers. And knowing my teaching, my understanding, and knowing my feelings about the Founding Fathers, she felt the need to share with me some of the things that she had learned. And I want to tell you that you need to guard yourselves with the truths about these men, because the modern education system is all about destroying their reputations, destroying who they were. We don't care who they were, but they care about destroying the Constitution. You see, you cannot attack the Constitution with fact, with history, and defeat it. Both of those things bolster the Constitution and maintain its integrity. So what you have to do is you have to personally attack the men who wrote it as an effort to discredit the document itself. And she told me one of the most memorable things that she learned from her class, her American history class, was that Alexander Hamilton was a womanizer who was killed in a duel over a woman. That was what they spent all that time teaching about Alexander Hamilton. They also taught the much too often taught myth that George Washington cheated on his wife with Mrs. Fairfax. Simply not true. The irony is that these same people who will want to profess to you that men and women can be platonic friends want to say that because George Washington relied on the advice of Mrs. Fairfax and relied on her wisdom throughout his life, that he must have been having an affair with her. I want to mention to you that there are historians who have devoted entire books to this lie. So you must guard yourself with the truth. And the good thing about our Constitution is it was not written by one person. You can hate Alexander Hamilton and his big banking ideas, but he didn't write the Constitution. Not one person ratified the Constitution. The Constitution was ratified eventually by all 13 states, which were representing the body of the people. So we appreciate how many of you remember the 5 documents that created our Constitution. All right. So remember, it took 700 years to write the Constitution, not one man. And that's why this is so very important. But we know these men. Who are the rest? The first man to die in our independence movement was a black man. His name was Crispus Attucks. Crispus Attucks was a freed slave who had become a whaler for the merchant marines. Can you hand me a purple book? Because I don't trust myself with this memory. I think I can do it. I've done it before, haven't I, dear? Security blanket. Crispus Attucks was a freed slave who had gone to work as a whaler for the merchant marines. His ship was docked at the Boston port when he heard an alarm go off on his ship. Now, he ran up deck to put out the fire because that's usually what an alarm means when you're on a ship, and a fire on a ship is what? Not a good thing. So he ran up deck to put out the fire, only to find out that there was no fire, but that his own government had picked up arms against his own people. Crispus Attucks ran back below his deck, got 55 of his shipmates, and came out and gave his life so that we could have liberty. This is a artistic rendition of that day. The man front and center is Crispus Attucks. There were 4 other men who were killed on that day. And anybody know why this happened? What started the Boston Massacre? No, the Boston Tea Party is 3 years later. Actually, it was because some colonial boys threw snowballs at some redcoat soldiers. The colonial boys threw snowballs at the redcoat soldiers, and the redcoat soldiers got so angry they got permission from the royal governor to pick up arms against the people. You see, they got very aggressive against the boys who threw the snowballs. Then their parents came out and said, "Why are you manhandling our children?" The redcoat soldiers said, "They threw snowballs at us." The parents said, "So what?" And the next thing you know, we've got a big battle between the parents and the redcoats get permission to open fire over a snowball fight. Nothing like anything we're seeing today, though, right? There was a poem written about Crispus Attucks in his day by a man named John Boyle O'Reilly. Honor to Crispus Attucks, who was leader and voice that day. The first to defy and the first to die with maverick, car, and gray. Call it riot or revolution, his hand first clenched at the crown. His feet were the first in perilous place to pull the king's flag down. His breast was the first one rent apart, that liberty's stream might flow. For our freedom now and forever, his head was first laid low. Call it riot or revolution, or mob or crowd as you may. Such deaths have been seed of nations. Such lives shall be honored for aye. Who knows what that means, to be honored for aye? Forever. How many of you, this is the first time you've ever heard of Crispus Attucks? We're not doing a very good job of honoring them forever, are we? Crispus Attucks, even by our framer standards, is seen as the first man to give his life for our independent movement. I would say the first man probably who gave his life for our independence movement was a man by the name of James Otis Jr. Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. I got to see Crispus Attucks' gravesite while we were in Boston. And there's a tombstone that is there that lists Crispus Attucks. It lists Maverick, Carr, and Gray and on there as well. And on the tombstone lists them as the first men who gave their lives for the independence movement. Now, there is an effort to overturn that history. You are going to hear in your school systems that this is not true, that this is somehow a right-wing conservative effort to diminish the bigotry of our framers. Guard yourselves with the truth. Because the truth of the matter is, Crispus Attucks was not the only black man to fight for our independence. How many of you heard of a man named Ned Hector? Ned Hector was another freed slave who fought in the battles of Brandywine and Germantown. His unit was given the order to retreat. Now, as you've learned this week, provisions were very hard to come by for our colonists. Ned Hector refused to retreat. He said, "The British will not have my team. I will save my horses or perish myself." He ended up saving his armament in the wagon and his team of horses and getting a Medal of Honor from George Washington. How many of you have heard of Peter Salem? Peter Salem is another freed slave. There's a picture of what happened with Peter Salem, that being Peter Salem right there. Anybody know who that famous man is? That is Major Pitcairn. Peter Salem is credited with the shooting of Major Pitcairn. And George Washington would say that if it had not been for the courage of Peter Salem, this entire battle would have probably been turned over to British victory. George Middleton is another of our famous framers who fought in the regiment, one of the regiments of the Bucks of America. The truth of the matter is there were battalions of freed slaves who fought for our independence. This is one of the flags that they flew, the Bucks of America. There were provisions within the states, the newly formed states. All right, who can tell me the date that the states were formed? And I'll give you a free book. You already got yours. Okay, what? July 2nd. Very good. Go ahead and pick yourselves out something on the table. July 2nd, 1776, with the ratification of the Lee Resolution, we get 13 brand new states. These states had a provision that said, if you are a slave and you want to fight for independence, you are now a free man forever. I do, in all fairness, have to mention that the British had a similar offer. We will arm you slaves to help get the seditionists back under control. But when we get back under control, you go back to being a slave. Sound like a great idea? Little bit of interesting history. Go look up the James Madison took copious notes during the debates on the Constitution. And you can see the truth of the matter is slavery was forced on our colonies by Great Britain. There were many colonies throughout the colonial Americas who had repeatedly tried to abolish slavery prior to our Declaration of Independence. But Great Britain refused to allow them to do that with fines, tariffs, and even threats of military force. Our war for independence was just as much of a war for independence from Great Britain as it was a war for independence from slavery. How many of you heard of George Middleton, Ned Hector, Peter Salem? We're supposed to be honoring these men forever. I think because we don't know who they are, we should be ashamed of that, don't you? Do you know what that really means? There are some men who gave their only free breath so that you and I could sit in this room, freely associate, say a prayer. And we could even criticize the government if we wanted to. There's not been any of that going on, has there? And because of what they did, we don't live in fear that stormtroopers will bust in the door, take us into custody, and at worst execute us. How many of you realize that is not a liberty enjoyed all across this world? Well, not only did we have the Bucks of America, we had Bernardo de Galvez. Bernardo de Galvez was the governor of Louisiana when it was owned by Spain. Spain had not entered into our independence movement yet, and Bernardo de Galvez was watching what was going on with the battles with our colonial forces. Now, I want to also take this moment to explain to you the Declaration of Independence was not the beginning of our battles with our government. By the time we signed the Declaration of Independence, we had already been on the battlefield with organized battles and bullets for nearly 3 years. The Declaration of Independence was not the beginning of our battles. It was the end of our tolerance to the to the government's tyranny. It was the end of our petitioning, our begging for their mercy, our begging for their reestablishment of our rights as guaranteed by our 5 liberty charters. Go read Patrick Henry's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech. He will describe to you how much we petitioned, how many times we begged and pleaded. The Declaration of Independence was the end of our petitioning. Bernardo de Galvez defied orders from the country of Spain, who said, do not get involved in this. Leave this alone. And Bernardo de Galvez helped the colonists get equipment and even supplied in a limited force manpower in order for the colonists to take away from Great Britain and take control of the Mississippi River Valley there. If it had not been for Bernardo de Galvez, the colonists would not have gained a very important waterway control in order to get their supplies. But that's enough for the men, because we have lots of women to thank. This is another thing that you need to guard yourselves against, because our current history books are wanting to teach you that the women during our revolutionary period were weak, irrelevant, cowards cowering underneath the overbearing, chauvinistic husbands. Remember, we have to attack the men who wrote the Constitution in order to undermine the value of the Constitution. And by doing that, we have to undermine their contribution in order to elevate the men to a level of women haters. I want to share a little story with you. While we were in the cemetery looking at the gravestones, I went looking. Samuel Adams has a headstone there. They say he's buried there. I guess he is. So I went looking for his wife, Elizabeth. I thought it would be strange that they would bury Sam in a different place than Elizabeth. So there just happened to be a tour guide giving a tour of the cemetery at the same time. And she was waiting for the tour to catch up with her. We were all standing by Sam's grave. And I said to her, where's Elizabeth Adams' headstone? She says, oh, well, she doesn't get one. I said, she doesn't get one? She said, yeah, the women weren't worthy of headstones back then. I said, are you kidding me? The cemetery is full of women with headstones. Oh, well, I meant her. I said, why would you say that? He said, well, they didn't value their women back then. I said, no, I'm sorry. You're very, very wrong. I said, our women were so important to this liberty movement. I said, the men looked to the women for advice. Mercy Otis Warren, Abigail Adams, Elizabeth Adams, Hannah Winthrop, all of these women, the men were pen pals with, seeking advice from. John Adams and George Washington looked to the women quite often more than he looked to the men. She just grumbled, waved her head, and went back. Let's get started with our tour, please. But you see, this has become a phenomenon in America. This idea that these women were somehow oppressed. Let me mention to you something. That may serve an agenda to create a falsehood in who these men are, but I am disgusted at the way it denies these women their due glory. Mercy Otis Warren, who I'm a little biased for, she is my favorite. I feel my heart is just somehow spiritually linked with her, so I tear up when I talk about her. How many of you were in Bus 10? So when we went to the Boston Tea Party Museum, how many of you remember Sally? Sally and I got to talk a little bit while you guys were exploring the bottom of the boat. Sally is also a Mercy Otis Warren fan, and we got to stand there on the boat and geek out a little while talking about our favorite founding mother. She gets to do something I don't, though. She actually gets to dress up and be Mercy Otis Warren every now and again. I want to be her when I grow up. Mercy Otis Warren was our first American woman playwright. She was self-educated, and she wrote Shakespearean-style plays written in satire. And the whole self-educated. I want to mention to you most of the people back then were homeschooled, okay? Yay, homeschoolers. She wrote Shakespearean-style plays in the form of satire to poke fun at the British government and rally the people around the liberty movement. They are absolutely brilliant. If you like Shakespearean style writing, you've got to read some of the stuff that Mercy wrote. She is hilarious. She is also our first American woman historian. She wrote a 3-volume set called The Rise, Progress, and Termination of the American Revolution. She said, I have to write this history because I lived it. By the way, I have volumes 1 and half of volume 2 right here of her Rise, Progress, Termination of the American Revolution. I will have it on my table if you want to come and look at it. By the way, she wrote it with such truth and candor that it ticked off some of the founding fathers. John Adams wrote a scathing letter to Mercy over what she wrote in that book, which made me want to read it even more. She was an advisor to Washington, Jefferson, Adams, and many of the men who we see as the leaders of our movement. We will stand against tyranny today, or our children will bow tomorrow, she said. We have to understand the perspective was not gaining liberty for themselves, but so that you could have this liberty. Now I want you to see the resolve of these women. Mercy said, America stands armed with resolution and virtue, but she still recoils at the idea of drawing against a nation from which she derived her origin. Yet Britain, like an unnatural parent, how many of you remember the little talking pictures in the Boston Tea Party Museum? Do you remember George III screaming about being our parent and the colonies being his children? This was Mercy sticking him in the eye. Yet Britain, like an unnatural parent, is ready to plunge her dagger into the bosom of her affectionate offspring. May we not yet hope for more lenient measures. Do you know, up into the point and through even the battle itself, they were praying that they would never have to war. They held off to the very, very last minute where there was no other choices. As a matter of fact, one of the greatest opponents to the battle itself was George Washington. George Washington was pulling back on the reins. You would think that odd of a general, right? A man who his whole lifelong dream was to be a soldier. And yet he was pulling back. Why do you suppose? Well, at that point, his loyalty, though, was with the colonies. He was a man of war. He had seen the horrors of war. And it was something that he did not want us to experience in our own backyards. The battle between the colonists and Great Britain could be classified as what kind of war? A civil war. A civil war is very different than a foreign war. A foreign war is where troops go and they fight against people they don't know, they may never know, and probably don't look anything like them. A civil war is where you stand in your own yard and you point a gun at your neighbor, your friend, your family member, and know at that moment it's either your life or theirs. And George did not want that for us. and they prayed for lenient measures. Hannah Winthrop, another patriot founding mother. Yonder the destruction of the detestable weed made by cruel exaction engages our intention. See, it wasn't about the tea. It is about the symbol of the tea, what the government had done through the tea. The virtuous and noble resolution of America's sons in defiance of threatened desolation and misery from arbitrary despots demands our highest regard. When we talked yesterday about the reasons we declared independence, there were 5 reasons. Does anybody remember what they were? Legislation without representation, mandated purchases, warrantless searches, denial of due process, and being subject to foreign courts and foreign law. They called that despotism that demanded our highest regard. May they yet be endowed with all the firmness necessary to carry them through all their difficulties till they come off conquerors. The union of the colonies, firm and sedate resolution of the people, is an omen for good unto us. They saw the union in the Declaration of Independence as a good omen to obtain our liberty. Now, you guys learned about the Boston Tea Party. Just 10 months after the Sons of Liberty threw tea in the harbor, the women held their own Tea Party meeting. How many of you guys know about the women's Tea Party meeting? Penelope Barker in Edenton, North Carolina, brought together over 50 colonial women who signed a pledge. Penelope called them together by saying, maybe it has only been the men who have protested the king up to now. That only means we women have taken too long to let our voices be heard. Hey, ladies, are you listening? You have a voice to be heard. You have no reason to sit quiet. And the voice to be heard demands that you stand up and speak. Can I get an amen? And these women said, hey, these guys are doing something. Why are we sitting here doing nothing at all? Now remember, legislation without representation, warrantless searches, mandated purchases. These women took a pledge to purchase no English-made goods until the laws that had enslaved their people were repealed. I want to repeat that again. The laws that had enslaved their people were repealed. They called the government telling you you have to buy something slavery. Because how are you free if you can't even choose what you consume? And then they did something that proved all these modern historians are right, that they're all weak, irrelevant cowardices, right? No. They did something quite to the opposite. Look what they said. Penelope says, we are signing our names to a document, not hiding ourselves behind costumes like the men in Boston did at their tea party. The British will know who we are. Are you catching that, guys? They called the men out for being cowards, hiding behind costumes, and said, no. We are standing for this liberty. It is worth our life, our fortune, and our sacred honor. And we are going to sign our names, send it to the government, so the British know exactly who we are. But you need to wrap your brain around how exactly brave and bold that was. These were not women of no reputation. These were women who carried last names of great reputation, and they sent them to the British government, which means they not only sent their names, but they sent the names of every person in their family. Do you know the majority of the names on that list belonged to men who were English merchants, pledging to purchase no English-made goods and then sending over the names of English merchants in that protest? How do you think the British government received that? How many of you, do you think they kept their jobs? Those English merchants? Do you know what else? they were immediately charged with treason, which means they could have been shot on sight. These women, by making this public statement, are simply saying this liberty that we are standing for is worth more than a paycheck, and it's worth more than the lives of the men who will bring it home. And they said, we will do it bravely, we will do it boldly, because liberty is a gift from God, and it's worth our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And then the persecution came. This is a cartoon done by the British Tories, the British Loyalists, published in the newspapers, because our liberty fighters were vehemently attacked as traitors. And this picture depicts these women of the Edenton, North Carolina Tea Party, a society of patriotic ladies who are engaging in frivolous activity with men who are not their husbands. Look at that. Their children are on the floor being tormented by dogs, and all they care about is their partying and their making of fake tea. Elizabeth Adams, one of the most neglected founding mothers that we have, the wife of Samuel Adams. Samuel Adams was so dedicated to the movement that she was lucky if she saw her husband once a year. She wrote Sam a letter one time and said this: I beg you would not give yourself any pain on our being so near to the camp. The place I am in is so situated that if the regulars should ever take Prospect Hill — how many of you know where Prospect Hill is? Which God forbid, I should be able to make an escape, as I am within a few stones cast of a back road which leads to the most retired parts of Newton. I want you to notice that she is not writing to Sam saying, you dirty, rotten scoundrel, why are you still away from home? Why aren't you coming home to take care of your family? She said, no, Sam, don't worry about us. We got all this under control. These women were fleeing their homes, some of them watching them burn to the ground, watching their children run off into the forests in terror, having to set up new lives in new ways that they never experienced, and they had to do this all without the support of the men in their lives. How many of you woke up this morning with an escape route? She says, I beg you to excuse the very poor writing, as my paper is bad and my pen made with scissors. How many of you desperately missed someone so much that you were willing to use handmade paper that was no good and use scissors as a pen? I should be glad, my dear, if you shouldn't come down soon. You would write me word who to apply for some money, for I am low in cash and everything is very dear. She's saying, Sam, tell me which of our friends are loyal to the liberty movement so that I can seek some help. By the way, this is another cartoon written within the liberty movement. These are British redcoats raiding someone's home through these writs of assistance. I want you to realize that these writs of assistance were not just simply knocking on the door, will you please allow us in, and going through their stuff to make sure they have the stamp. No, it was terrorizing these people for what they believed. Mercy Otis Warren said, I have my fears, not notwithstanding the complicated difficulties that rise before us, there is no receding. Can I explain something to you? Fear and bravery have a relationship together. My son, you know Colton, don't make fun of him for I'm telling you this story, but he was afraid of the dark. How many of you went through that stage, afraid of the dark? So we had our bedtime routine, and I told him, I said, okay, tonight you're going to get up and turn off the light and come to bed. He said, no, Mommy, I can't. It'll be dark and I'll be scared. I said, it's okay. It's the same room and I will be right here. You go turn off the light. So he creeped out of the bed like this and slowly walked the light switch, stood there and stared at me for a few seconds like I was going to come and run to his rescue. Turned off the light switch and did that superhuman thing that every child can do, jump straight from the light switch into the bed. Okay? He snuggles up really close to me, and I notice that he's crying. And I said, Colton, baby, you were so brave. He said, no, Mommy, I wasn't brave. I was scared. I said, Colton, being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. Being brave means you do what you have to do, even if you are scared. Our framers were not superhuman creatures. They had fears just the same as ours, yet they were resolved for this liberty that was this gift from God. Abigail Adams said, what should be the battle cry of every American, especially a woman? And be it known unto Britain, even American daughters are politicians and patriots and will aid the good work with their female efforts. Don't you think it's about time we stop denying these women their due glory? Isn't it about time we stop brainwashing our children into believing this lie that women were created inferior to the men and sustained throughout history? That somehow it's better to be a man because men have more opportunities than women. You wonder why we have such a gender identity crisis in our country when we perpetrate these lies about our women and we fail to show our daughters how strong and how brave and the proper role models they should be looking up to. We should be proud. We should be proud that we are women, because as women, we are just as much the founders of this liberty as the men. As a matter of fact, this is their legacy. This is General Cornwallis, and well into our revolution, a British soldier approached General Cornwallis and said this to him: we may destroy all the men in America, and we will still have all we can do to defeat the women. By the time this soldier said this to British General Cornwallis, the women had nearly completely decimated the British linen industry in the colonies with their protests. They traveled throughout the colonies teaching the women how to make linen out of flaxen and wool so they wouldn't have to buy the government-mandated linen, how to make tea out of sassafras and raspberry so they wouldn't have to buy the East India Trading Company tea. And they were such a formidable force, they struck fear into the hearts of the British government. I have my fears, yet notwithstanding the complicated difficulties that rise before us, there is no receding. Why? Because we will stand against tyranny today, or our children will bow tomorrow. I want to ask you, this is their legacy. What do we want our legacy to be? People who believe lies, created into docile subjects, or people who are willing to take up the mantle and expand on the legacy of liberty and be the champions for our children. That is what is demanded of us. Now I want to mention to you, this is my website again. You can find articles on my website about the Founding Mothers. I also have the biographies that I talked about today are also in this book here. I have radio shows. How many of you have an Android phone? How many of you have an iPhone? Go to your app stores, search my name. You will get, you can download my free mobile app to your phone, and then you will be able to listen to all my radio shows, read all my articles, and watch all my videos through this app for totally free. So my name obviously is KrisAnne Hall, and that's how you can continue your education. Now let me ask you something. How many of you young people, and I guess adults as well, realize that we are not operating the way the government is supposed to operate? Okay? How many of you feel comfortable standing up on a street corner and preaching the error of our government? Okay, so everybody who raised their hand that said they knew the government's not working, operating properly, should also be raising their hand, willing to stand up and have the courage to do so. But I realize something. I think what holds us back is this. We know something's wrong. We know it's not right. But we don't have a firm foundation in the knowledge to give us the boldness to take the stand. How many of you, just in all honesty, you don't have to raise your hands, are afraid to take that stand because you're not quite sure? That you're afraid that you will be confronted by somebody else who knows a little bit more than you. That's why this education that you guys are getting here this week is so very important. Please don't take this for granted. Please don't act like this is just, something to do with your time because your parents made you come or it's cool to hang out with friends. The future of liberty. You are all our older kids. Those junior campers will rely on you to preserve their liberty. And when you look at them today, ask yourselves, am I ready? Am I able to do what I'm supposed to do before God and before them to make sure that we have a limited and defined government that protects the liberty, their liberty, instead of taking it in the name of security and prosperity and comfort? I have 3 principles. Liberty over security, principle over party, truth over your favorite personality. It's time for us to get the foundational education that we need so we will be infused with the courage to stand. I want to thank you guys for inviting me to come here. You cannot know. I hope that I've been a blessing to you because you cannot know how blessed I have been to be here this week and how much of a blessing it is to see you guys sitting here just soaking all of this up. And so I want to thank God in front of everybody for an opportunity for you guys to learn these truths and to pick up the mantle that our framers left behind for us. God bless.